Thank
May I
you.
now request Mr. Shailesh Sheth to talk about GST? Possibly he's going to talk about the most hot topic as far as MSMEs are concerned. We all talked about GST. GST is a unifying tax, single point tax, simplified. But MSMEs have got their own challenges, and I'm sure Mr. Sheth addresses them in his presentation. Over to you, sir.
Yes.
Australia.
Thank you, Mr. Srinivasan. And good afternoon to my all respected co-panelists and also the viewers and the listeners. Again, 10 minutes for GST, which can now go on for about another 10 Janma. It's going to be an extremely challenging task. And GST from the finance management perspective is yet another very novel but very, very exciting and interesting idea. Because
Mr. Seth,
whenever...
please feel free to extend. Please feel free to extend. There are enough and more people out there suffering from GST. So please.
Okay, thank you very much. Because traditionally, whenever somebody, any entrepreneur, any businessman, for that matter, even we tax professional, were to think about the finance management in the context of tax, what comes to mind first is tax planning, tax avoidance, and for some, the bold people, tax evasion. So, yes, so because all finance management is only revolving around how we can avoid the tax if we do not want to evade the tax.
Correct, absolutely.
Yes, but I'm afraid I wouldn't be really speaking about how to avoid tax, forget about how to evade tax. Friends, the MSME, just to have a very brief background, it is not, nobody can deny that MSME sector has remained a backbone of the Indian economy.
Absolutely.
And considering the overall, the structure of Indian economy and the people comprising it in the trade and businesses, MSME will continue to play its most vital role as a lifeline of the Indian economy for the decades and decades and for quite some time. I mean, their place is quite secured. And the speaker speaks for itself. These are the latest figure from the the ministry's annual report as on 2018-19. 6.33 crore MSME units across the country, 45% share in the country's total manufacturing output, 40% of the total workflow for employed by the state sector, 110, it is now 111 million people employed by the sector, contributed to 40% of the exports and contributed to 30% of the national GDP, out of which about 26% is by the manufacturing sector. So the speaker speaks for itself. And these are despite the number of challenges which traditionally this particular sector has been facing for all these decades since independence. When we come to talk about the GST, GST definitely has posed a new wave of challenge for the MSME sector. GST was considered to be a panacea for all ills, and it has suddenly become a daily pain point for the MSME sector in particular.
Absolutely.
I'm afraid, I don't want to sound doomsdayer, but I'm afraid that the pain probably has just started. So if somebody thinks that in last 4 years we have seen the worst of the GST, I'm afraid the drama has not yet even begun. So for a MSME sector, this is the biggest challenge. The GST, which was introduced with a much fanfare in the midnight of 30th June 2012, one nation, one tax, and doing away with lot of other procedural hassles, doing away with host of the indirect taxes at the central level, state level, and the local level. Yes, it has done that. It has subsumed majority of the taxes. I don't want to sound any negative. There is nothing to sound positive or negative about it. GST has its advantages. What I'm really afraid is that somewhere the whole process, the whole journey is getting derailed. And this poses its own challenge for the MSME sector in particular, with the type of resources and the infrastructure and other capabilities available with the large scale units. They will probably not find it too difficult to adjust themselves to the changing environment and the challenges posed by the GST. But MSME sector, we have with their certain inherent, the constraints which this sector has been facing, for them to fine tune itself and fine tune its business operations with the GST is going to be a formidable challenge. Another thing is, we have always, majority of the people has always seen the GST as a tax reform. Since 2014, I've been speaking on GST. I have never considered, in my personal view, GST is not merely a tax reform. GST is much more than it is a business reform. It is much more than it is an economic reform. And I would go to the extent of saying that for the country like India, for the trade and businesses and the tax professionals and the tax officers, GST is nothing less than the cultural reform. It is not the simplicity, a question of changing our mindset. We will have to practically transform the way we think and way we act. It is a cultural reform. And this is equally good for the MSME sector. The new world challenge for that is pre-GST, we had a global slowdown and demonetization. These were two formidable challenges pre-GST. And then came post-GST. What are the impact of the GST on a daily basis? And all these aspects have a direct effect on the finance, one way or another. I'm just touching upon, obviously, considering the time. Significant impact on the supply chain, complexities and delay of the ITC input tax credit chain, increased borrowing to meet the increasing need for the working capital. GST definitely has resulted into the manifold increase in the working capital requirement of the businesses. Coupled with that, MSME sector have always been facing the issue of high receivables. They don't have that type of money and muscle power in a way, muscle in a lighter way. They don't have that type of power to really ensure that receivables are actually coming within time. They are by and large at the mercy of their major buyers, particularly those who are supplying to OEMs and other big units. Those who are actually suppliers to the main, if they are dependent upon the one particular entity, major business entity, then the things can be slightly difficult at times. Then delayed refunds, substantial payment on daily and weekly and monthly basis, increased cost of borrowings, lack of compliance infrastructure. GST is a highly compliance-driven law like any other indirect tax law. Decline in sales volumes, technical glitches and technological inadequacies, prevalence of the informal economy dominated by cash. This is yet another aspect which I would slightly deal with. The informal economy has not yet, that culture is still gripping this MSME sector. And COVID-19, amidst all this, the challenges, when the sector was in the midst of all these challenges, COVID-19 practically became like a proverbial last nail on the coffin.
Absolutely.
It practically turned out to be a genocide for the MSME sector, with lakhs and lakhs of units having gone out of the business, having actually unwittingly, absolutely by force, by compulsion, having down their shutters forever.
So,
and I'm sure this is something actually it requires an independent, in-depth study, sort of a white paper on this. Coming to the other challenges for the MSME sector are their confined work environment. This is a CII paper. Lack of access to timely and adequate capital. Mr. Breach can probably look into this. All these adequate capital for the MSME sector remains a challenge. Limited awareness, lack of access to markets, limited access to appropriate knowledge or technology, lack of availability of sustainable skilled human resources, poor procurement, insufficient infrastructure, and lengthy and cumbersome documentation. One way or another, all these challenges traditionally being faced by the sector have only been actually further accentuated or compounded by the GST. So, having said that, how do we revive and rejuvenate this sector? India's dream, our Honorable Prime Minister dream, to take the Indian economy to make it a 5 trillion economy by 24-25, and MSME sector undisputedly, in my opinion, is going to play a sterling role in achieving this dream. It will play its role, and we will achieve this dream. I personally have no doubt about it, and the sector itself will. But and but sector needs to be for this focused, flexible, financially fit, frugal, fastidious, farsighted, and foresighted. So these are certain the initial points. Coming to now GST, friends, when I've been thinking about the finance management, I very hurriedly in one night prepared this entire presentation. There are a lot of things to really. Yesterday night only I prepared this. I was in a two minds whether to prepare the PPT or not, use the PPT or not. But in the context of finance management, the entire tax ecosystem, be it direct tax or indirect tax, I look at it, okay, the five components of this entire tax ecosystem are adoption of tax technology, tax knowledge, tax compliance, tax litigation, and tax optimization.
Yeah. True.
So adoption of tax technology, promotion of tax knowledge, ensuring tax compliance, managing tax litigation, and gaining through tax optimization. Let me take first the tax technology. Tax technology is a survival mantra for the MSME sector. They cannot, for some reason, they have some aversion, they have some allergies, they have some apprehension about adoption of the technologies in running their day-to-day business activities. First, normally MSME consider, majority of them consider technology as a very costly affair.
True.
Secondly, they consider that something which they don't know, they don't want to get into it. A large number of the MSME sector, particularly tiny, micro, that is micro and small, are still being run by traditionally by the semi-educated or uneducated people even, but they are doing wonderful job. They are skilled, but they are not educated.
True.
So suddenly for them, technology becomes something alien, something like a monster. They don't want themselves to be seen as a dependent upon others. Others means the software consultant or whomsoever.
Yeah. True.
So they don't know how to. The cutting edge technology is ever changing. Every moment it is changing. They feel that they will not be able to keep the pace with it. So there are quite a few reasons by which MSME sector's adoption of technology has always been little bit. The biggest gain we have made it to digital payment and RuPay and all, which is actually showing. Right. However, as the Stewart brand said, once a new technology rolls over you, if you are not part of the steamroller, you are a part of the road.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah. So the next challenge is arising from digitization interim report. I will not read it. This is the OECD report, which was released, where actually very comprehensively dealt with the challenges, particularly in the taxation area posed by the digital economy. When we talk about world across, the taxation regime is undergoing a massive transformation due to disruptive technologies, which is otherwise also changing the face of the world in a manner not known to so many people.
True.
Blockchain technology, 3D printing, robots and taxation, these are all, these are all subject by itself, how they are affecting and how they are affecting, having its impact on the taxation regime world across. Like 3D printing, how it poses the challenge for the customs. So these are all subject by itself. But so rapid digitalization of tax administration, I would only say to my brothers, my esteemed players in the MSME sector, that, and for that matter, every taxpayer, in the adoption of technologies, tax department everywhere in India also is 10 or maybe 100 steps ahead of the taxpayers.
Oh.
They are much, much ahead of the taxpayers everywhere. And rightly so, justifiably so. This is the need of the hour. And MSME sector cannot lag behind. The power of tax technology is being deployed on a every day regularly by the tax departments in our country also to improve the tax administration, to ensure and facilitate tax compliance, to detect and counter tax frauds, to plug tax leakages, to drive better tax enforcement, and to increase tax base. And this is every day, every moment happening. Major challenges for the MSME in their journey towards the digital shift will be limited growth capital, resistance to augmentation of digital technology, challenges of storage analysis and management of data, creation of a talent pool, and ignorance. However, if the sector's aversion to technology adoption has any answer, that answer was provided by COVID-19.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yes, it was an eye opener.
Yeah, true.
And it is heartening to know that quite a few players in the sector understood that they cannot survive if they continue to do their business in the manner in which they have been doing it for decades. And they have been very, very quick to adopt the technologies. I hope others would also take the lesson from that. As far as the GST tech is a purely technology-driven tax regime. Gone are the days of the physical manual and everything. It's a purely tech-driven tax. This is one single major characteristic of the GST which one should keep it in mind. And an efficient technology will actually help the sector, the player, the taxpayer to determine correctly the tax, to comply the law with the law, and to help in the reporting and the analysis. Tax technology, therefore, the question is it a necessity or a luxury or an opportunity? Sector may very well remember that it is an opportunity. No longer, it is definitely not a luxury, but from necessity, it has become an opportunity. It has to be converted into an opportunity. Tax knowledge, because tax technology, one of the integral part of it is a tax knowledge, which is the level of awareness and understanding of the tax system of a country. The tax knowledge means tax education. MSME sector has been my interactions over last 5-6 years. In fact, in last 4-5 years, I delivered about more than 120 talks on GST. So in my interaction with the sectors, industries across the country and even professional, I could see that they are lacking there is a lacking of the basic awareness. Tax education, I hope government will do well into educating the MSME sector, because they are lacking in the proper guidance, and for them, going to professional every time is neither financially viable nor possible, practical. So tax education means I should be aware about my tax rights and obligation. I should be aware about the type of tax I am required to pay and what is the tariff rate. I should be aware about the tax mechanism and how to pay the tax functions and the tax penalties. What will be the penalties or fine which will ensure if I fail to pay my tax liability correctly, and the assessment process. Now in all this, because today the one major change which I always look into my interaction with the trade and industry is that there is a willingness to pay the tax. There is an increasing willingness to pay the tax. Only they don't want the hassles, and they want to be properly advised and guided into this. The tax compliance, the next part of the tax ecosystem. Taxation laws will remain ever changing. The frequent tweaking of the GST laws is a moot point. This will continue. GST or VAT has never settled in any of the 198 or 200 jurisdictions across the world. As Edmund Burke has rightly said, law has to be stable, but it cannot remain static.
True.
So stability is welcomed, but not the, it cannot remain static. So it has to keep pace with the changing times and the challenges posed by the ever-changing technologies, behavior of the taxpayers. There are many factors which affect the formulation of the tax policies and the tax laws. So this will continue, and GST definitely, with its frequent changes, which will become the order, it has become the order of the day, and we will continue to so for some long time, poses a formidable challenge for the business. So severe consequences of tax non-compliance should be available, should be known to the party. If I don't pay the tax or delay my payment, so today the interest rate is 18%. A very simple example. Gone are the days where the government used to charge 12%. Now, if my bank finance is available me anywhere from 8 to 10%, suppose, then I would be foolish as a businessman to entail the liability of 18% by evading or avoiding the tax.
Very true. Very true.
Right. Similarly, by not making the payment within 180 days of the tax invoice, date of the tax invoice, I have to reverse my credit with interest. And then whenever I make the payment, I will be entitled to the recredit. But for 6 months, where I might have utilized that credit, which now I am paying back to the government at 18%. It was 24%, which has now been retrospectively become 18%. So these are certain example of the tax compliance and the importance of tax compliance. Coming to the other inevitable aspect of the any taxation regime, tax litigation. This is one of my favorite quote. Ambrose Bierce says, litigation is a machine which you go into as a pig and come out as a sausage. And here the you means taxpayer. Obviously, we professional might enjoy the taste of the sausage. But yes, and litigation, the disputes are always inevitable part of any taxation regime. The causes of disputes are many and far many, which are not. GST has only changed the very dimension and the very severity of those causes. Unfortunately, sadly, GST, as I see, I have probably the most litigious tax legislation ever. There are more than about 2,200 writ petitions, or maybe more than that, across the country. Thousands of disputes going on. So, and multiple reasons. I'm not going into these reasons. These are all part of my PPT, which I would request the chamber to share it with the members and participants and all.
So kindful, sir. So kindful. So
I mean, it would be my pleasure. I could have done it much more in detail, but whatever I could do in one night.
No.
So these are the various reasons why, which are the causes of the tax disputes. Coming to the tax litigation, I would very seriously and sincerely say it is a path best avoided if it can be. Litigation is a costly affair, time-wise, money-wise, and energy-wise. It is a very costly affair. But once you are into it, a sector player, particularly MSME sector player, why I'm all this saying? Because I could see the very pathetic lack of awareness amongst them.
True.
Because most of them are one-man show like, or maybe a couple of family members. These are their constraints. But one should really know. They need not become an expert, but they should know what are the multiple stages of litigation process. If an audit objection come, how to deal with it and what are the repercussions. If the summons is issued and you are being called, then what are the repercussions? What is ASMT 10? I'm sure those who are taxpayers will directly understand. What is ASMT 10 and what are the consequences? What is DRC 01A? What is DRC 01? What is order DRC 07? What is RFD 06 rejecting the refund? What are the remedies available to me? How do I deal with it? This will all have a telling impact on the overall finances. Because when you go in appeal, first appeal, the SSC is required to pay 10% of the tax amount as a pre-deposit, which in custom, excise and service tax is total 10% in the up to tribunal. And when we go to the second stage of the tribunal, it is another 20% of the tax amount. So 30%, which is going to hit all the taxpayers in the coming days. GST tribunal is not constituted. There is a constitutional challenge going on. So the time consumed, alertness, and the last part is tax optimization. And when I say tax optimization, it is not earning through the tax planning or tax avoidance or tax evasion. It is earning by paying.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Interesting.
The earn from your taxes legally. That's why I said tax is always a critical input in making any informal business decision, and it has to be, particularly GST with its impact on the overall the finance of the company, business of the company. GST is a consumption tax. All indirect taxes are consumption tax. It is a destination-based consumption tax. And it is supposed to be levied from the economic perspective. GST is supposed to be levied on the consumption of goods and services taking place at any given point of time in an economy. Now, because though it is a consumption tax, there is no law which will actually compel a consumer to pay the tax, whether it is in a B2B transaction or B2C transaction. The supplier, taxpayer can recover it. Supplier of goods or services, business can recover it from the customer. But if it is not able to recover, then the liability remains his. In a typical GST VAT, the system which works through it is a value-added tax, primarily intended to avoid the cascading effect of tax on tax, by granting the credit of the tax paid at the earlier stage to be utilized for the payment of tax at the subsequent stage. So businesses are expected to only work as a pass-through. They are working, they are on the payroll of the government in collection of the taxes without any remuneration. So they are expected to act as a pass-through only. Then also the host of disputes are always faced by the businesses under the VAT regime. This is one single question which is plaguing the policymakers and framers across the world. Why businesses are suffering so much of this, so many disputes, if they are supposed to pass it on to the customers. OECD, IMF, World Bank, they are all grappling with this question. Now, so businesses have to remember that they may be able to, they may not be able to pass on the tax, but they have to pay the tax, right? And there, all this awareness, whether ITC has been correctly factored into the pricing of the product or not, which is the tax paid on the raw material or services is my cost. If ITC is not available, it becomes a cost. If ITC is available to that extent, it is saved. Then GST's main objective, the non-grant of or non-availment of ITC, we sometimes miss the taking ITC. These are certain inverted tax structure. My product entails 18% rate of raw material, 18%. My final product is at 12%. How do I take the refund? Refund is not available for taxes paid on services and capital goods under inverted tax structure. That becomes my cost. I've just listed out these are certain live issues which are actually there. The business transaction involving processes. I have one unit in Maharashtra, another unit in Gujarat. There are some processing which are getting done by my Gujarat unit on a job work. Shall I go for the exemption job work, or shall I charge to my Gujarat unit and then take it back again on payment of tax?
Absolutely.
I have a registered office, head office in Maharashtra and factory in Gujarat. Whether I should go for the cross charge, it's a legal concept, or whether I should go for the input service distributor for the distribution of the credit of the services which I avail at my head office, which legally is allowed to me. How do I go about it? Then there are other wide-ranging amendments which have been made effective from 1st January 2022, which were earlier announced by Finance Act 2021 in the context of input tax credit. Some major amendments have been proposed in Finance Act 2022 also, which have now become the part of the law. They are not implemented. The last year budget have been implemented for 1st January. These are going to be one of the most major amendments which are going to affect the day-to-day business transaction of the any taxpayer, particularly MSME. So in the context of input tax credit, fake invoices, fraudulent credit is now no longer a profitable venture.
Absolutely.
It is no longer. The sooner the sector realizes this, better for them.
Very true. Very true.
It is no longer, yeah. And therefore, it is not only KYC for the banks and financial institutions and other entities. For the businessman, it is KYS. Please know your supplier.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And finally, the high cost of non-compliance or deliberate breach. By not complying unknowingly or knowingly, or by delaying my tax liabilities, or by not taking the ITC properly, or taking the input tax credit wrongly, the short-term or notional gain which I am making, whether it is worth compared to the cost involved if there is a litigation.
Absolutely.
That is where I say tax optimization. And finally, I'll just sum up by only saying this. I personally, with all the challenges our economy is facing, I am absolutely bullish about, absolutely positive about Indian economy's growth in the future. Yes, we are at the cusp of some very, very exciting growth. And MSME sector, the opportunities are going for organic and ethical growth. The opportunities are going to be abound for any businessman, particularly for MSME sector. The question is, MSME sector, will it seize the opportunity and reap the benefit or not? It is up to them. And GST is going to play a much, much vital role. World over, the contribution of the tax for the purpose of government various policies, the shift is clearly visible from the direct tax to indirect tax. And this will continue. This will continue. Indirect tax is going to play a major role in the overall revenue realization and the government policies implementation. This is something the businesses keep it in mind. And in the end, friend, ultimately it's money, my honey.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Sheth. Very enlightening. And as you rightly said, of course, all of us, and particularly at the Bombay Chamber of Commerce, we are extremely bullish about the Indian economy. We know there is good times ahead. In fact, day before, there was a chemical exposition in Bombay. And when we met some of the exhibitors, they said, I mean, the first day we didn't have time for lunch. There were so many customers coming, and the economy, there is buzz, and hopefully we'll sort of seize the opportunity. Thank you very much for the enlightening session.
Thank you very much.
With pleasure, but I'll come back to you for some
questions. I will be there for the question answer session. I will be there.
Please stay back.